Welcome to the Worthy People podcast. I am so excited today as we continue with our next level on God. Man, through God, we're getting to the next level in life. We're not leveling up. That means we're staying in our same situation. It's just getting a little better. Next level, the Bible tells us we get transformed. And the Bible tells us that all these promises that we can stand on, including promises for our health, success, financially, relationally, it says that God restores the years that have been stolen from us by the system, by our mistakes and incarceration, addiction, all those things. And so we get to the next level in life, not through chasing fame and money, but through serving God. And we want you to know that it can work for you in the same way. And so we like to feature guests that just have powerful and amazing testimonies. And I'm so glad to be joined by someone that is a good friend, and I am glad to know him and have him in my life. And he's got an amazing testimony. He's been on the audio podcast a few times. Yep. And so I want to introduce to you and welcome to the podcast as a guest today, Jimmy Almazan. What's up?
Cody, well, it's such a blessing to be here. It is, here we are. Finally comes the day. Cody has been telling me, you got to get on the podcast now. And now that there's video, and I'm like, I don't know. So yesterday I went to go get a haircut and everything. I was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to look. But thank you for having me here. It is such a blessing. It is incredible to see, finally, for y'all to get to see who I am, I love going into the prisons with Cody when we go in there. And this is a long-waited time, so I'm really excited to be here and for you to have me here. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to have you. Many of you know from Kairos, from going to the prison as well. And so, having you here on Pando, getting to reach people nationwide in prisons and jails, drug treatment centers that are watching. So stay tuned. You're going to want to hear Jimmy's story and how he's gotten to the next level with God. So Jimmy, I guess we'll dive right into it. We'll get right going. Go. So tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, maybe what life was like growing up.
Okay, yeah, most definitely. Well, first of all, I'm not a native from Texas. I wish, but nah, man, I actually was born in Mexico.
But you are a Cowboys fan.
I am a Cowboys fan. I've been my whole life a Cowboys fan. So there we go. I guess I am a native from Texas. So, man, Pastor always tells us, when we do our worthy declaration, let's say if the Cowboys have won the Super Bowl, man, I've been wishing that my whole life. It takes a lot
of faith to be a Cowboys fan.
Yeah, it takes a lot of faith. And there we go. That might have to do something to do as part of my testimony, maybe that's where my faith has been growing so much, or maybe that's where it's withered, but nah, it's been where it's going, man. Well, I'm from, actually, I grew up in a city called Moreno Valley, California, out there, so a long ways from Texas, man, and totally different environments, but man, I had the blessing to be able to visit Texas, because we have a lot of family out here too, and I'm not going to lie, I love the greenery. I love the ranch styles. I love the farms, and it's pretty awesome. The country, you can't top anything like Texas. I'm not going to lie. It's really amazing. But growing up, I would have to say it's not really the best, but I did have a lot of fun growing up. I have 2 brothers and a little sister. And man, do I love them with all my heart. Of course, we're all walking our own way. We still have a good relationship, but man, I wish it was like that the whole time, but it wasn't. Growing up, my pops, he used to drink a lot. And that's just what we were raised around, It's just something that I knew. It's something that I was, I guess, introduced to as a really young kid. The first drink I ever had was my dad being like, hey, yeah, try this, and his friends, and they thought it was kind of funny. I guess at the time for them it was, but I mean, if you look at it, that's not really something to laugh about, giving beer to a kid. But hey, I was introduced into all that. And in doing so, man, I had so much craziness with my cousins, with my brothers. I want to say I was a good little kid, but I wasn't. I was a knucklehead, and that showed growing up, you know, especially getting involved with all the drugs, with all the alcohol. But man, where can I start in my life? So I guess I could start with this. Is growing up, I had trust issues, and it was for a reason of like my pops having friends over at the house, you know, getting involved with all the drinking, getting involved with all that. Well, as you know, when you drink, you're not in your right state of mind, and unfortunately, that's what happens. You know, when people drink, they're not themselves, or maybe they are themselves, and they just show their true colors. But they definitely. It definitely brought out some, I could say, demons in some people, because they did things to me that it destroyed me, you know. And I tried to go to my pops, and my pops kind of got a little upset at me because, well, those were his friends. He's like, I guess, kind of defended them. And me going to my dad, you know, I want to have that great relationship with him, but going to someone you trust and they tell you like, oh no man, like you're lying, or that's not really what was happening, you know, it kind of breaks you, and it definitely broke me.
And at that point, you felt like your dad chose his friends over you.
Yeah, exactly. And that was so devastating, because I'm like, man, like at least in my thought at that point of age, I was like, man, I thought my dad was going to be there for me, you know. So instead of going to my dad after that, I started going to other people, you know, to find that trust, to find that the care that I wanted from my dad, I guess, to find the security, you know. I know a lot of friends that have gone through that, and they turn to gangs, you know, they turn to drugs and stuff. Well, me, I was one of those people that turned to addictions, and in my school, I found people that were similar like me, you know, that had gone, maybe not the same thing, but that they were also hurting, and that they were trying to hide their pain and whatnot. I kind of turned into a little bit of a loner, and that's okay, you know, but it's when I found those crazy friends, oh my gosh, that's where my whole life turned around, you know. I remember smoking at school, trying to act like, try to act cool. Oh my goodness, now that I think about it, it's so funny. Like, I remember we would roll up a piece of paper, and I rolled up a piece of paper, and I told my friends, you know, that were also going through it, I was like, hey, I got a cigarette, you know, like, let's go to the back. And we went to the back, and when we were smoking this rolled up piece of notebook paper, it's just paper. It's, man, but they were all like, yeah, they were all cool, and it was all bad going back to the campus smelling like burnt paper. That was no good. But then it started to grow, you know. It started to grow from paper to actual cigarettes to bringing my dad's alcohol to school. And I started seeing friends coming, you know, like, or what people think it's friends, you know, they come basically for the alcohol, or hey, this guy got cigarettes, I know who to go to. So next thing you know,
yeah, that's the same way in prison.
Oh man,
when you're in prison and you got something somebody wants, you know, and it's something to smoke or drink or whatever, you get all types of people that want to hit you up.
Yeah, and then they act all friendly, right? They would act all cool, like, oh yeah, man, this is the guy, he's the coolest, yeah, look at this and that. And then, like, I'm like, what the heck? Like, I've never seen this guy before in my life, other than that time that we drank, you know. And then all of a sudden you grow real popular, but it's not really popularity, you know. It's not really like fame. Yeah, it's fame, I guess, but in a bad way, you know. And it kind of numbed the pain. I guess I had found a purpose at that time with the alcohol, you know, with the friends, and or at least what they said, they were friends. But man, I just kept diving deeper and deeper into this hole that I wish I would have never gone into, you know. And I, of course, the alcohol helped, and then marijuana even helped even more, because man, I tell you, I did not remember anything when I was in that, because I would just get so high, I would fall asleep, or I would just, you know, not really think about the problems that I had going on around my house. And man, but then quickly I grew up, you know, and it graduated to bigger things. I wish it never would. It graduated so big that, man, like, Pastor, you always tell me, like, oh, if you share that story about the zip ties, it's going to take forever.
Oh, yeah. No, he's going to share a story in his testimony that you know, I met him, and after I met him, I knew him for a little while until I heard this story, you know, about his parents kidnapping him. Oh, well, I'll let it. Spoiler alert: he gets kidnapped. So
Yeah,
tell us about that crazy story. But maybe even to your parents, like what frame of mind were they in at the time that they wanted to,
of course,
that they wanted to kidnap you?
Yeah, I would say, and this is all part of my Jesus story. I love it. I hated it at the time, but I love it now because it turned me into who I am, and I am so grateful that my parents had to make this sacrifice, which at the time I'm like, how could you? Well, I dove so hard into drugs that I started messing with something called spice, you know, because my parents, they could smell marijuana. They knew that drug, you know, they knew
spice
weed.
Doesn't make everything nice.
Spice at the moment I thought it did, but nah, it was destroying my life. That is not a drug I ever recommend to anyone. It doesn't matter if you're on probation. It just don't mess with nothing. I guess they call it like K2 or something out here, you know.
It's like a synthetic.
It's a synthetic marijuana, but man, it was so addicting. I always tell people it's way more addicting than heroin because, I mean, when I was messing with this drug, of course I started because I had got caught by my parents. I had even gotten expelled from school from marijuana, so my dad was obviously on me. So I was like, I got to do something, and someone introduced to me spice. Hey, have you ever tried spice? It doesn't last as long, but it gives similar effects. So we tried it, and I guess I fell in love with it because I was like, man, yeah, it doesn't smell. It kind of smells like a cigarette, or it kind of smells like something, you know, like an incense burning, you know. And it got, at the beginning, it was just like smoking marijuana, but it got to the point where I was doing it every 30 minutes, to the point where like I took it to Six Flags once, and I was on a date, and man, I could just imagine how hard it was for this girl because I was like, yeah, I got to go to the restroom. And then we would go walk for like another 10, 15 minutes. And I'm like, oh, I got to go to the restroom again. So every restroom we would hit up, every restroom we would pass, I would be going in. And of course, I would smell like smoke coming out. So she knew it was just a terrible experience for her, you know. I think I rode one ride in that time. The rest of it, I was in the restroom getting high at an amusement park. That is crazy. But it got like that. It got to the point where every 30 minutes I needed to. And I actually added up how much money I spent during this addiction in 1 year of smoking just spice every 30 minutes, right? So it's like a little bag of it, and the bag was like $35. And so in 1 year, I was smoking up to $200,000 worth of money that I could have spent on anything else, making a business. But in the 3 years that I did, man, can you imagine that? You don't do that with just having a job, because I didn't have a job at the time. So I was just coming up with all this money. And so my parents started to see, hey, this guy isn't the same. You know, he's obviously messing with a different drug. He's messing with something else. Because when I would smoke weed, all I would do is go home, play video games, watch TV, eat, you know. But now it's different. Now I wanted to be on the streets. Now I wanted to do all this other things. So they're like, man, mijo, what's wrong with you? You look so different, you know. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, nah, I just have friends and we go out and this and that. I would never hang out with my friends. You know, that drug was so addicting and it destroyed my life. But my parents were like, they started seeing that I was messing up so much that they're like, we got to take action. If not, our son is going to kill himself. You know,
time to take action.
Time to take action. Yeah. And they would tell me too, like, hey, you know, you got to get help. You got to do this and whatnot. And I was like, I'm good. Like, you guys are tripping on me. Like, I'm just enjoying my time, you know, like if I smoke, okay, but I'm not hurting you guys. Man, I was hurting them so bad. And this was the first time I realized that I was hurting them, but I didn't realize at that time. But now that I think about my testimony, I realize that this was the first time that I was realizing that I was hurting them. But man, they they took drastic measures because I remember I started to get violent. I started to get like upset. Me and my mom would argue. Me and my pops would argue.
And how old were you at this time?
I think I was like 16 or 17 years old at this time when I started. No, I was 18 because it was towards the end of the school year once I got expelled. So I was around 18 years old. Just graduated. I graduated when I started using it, so I was just graduated high school. So I was definitely an adult, and it was wild, you know. My parents, no wonder they could see it so much. You know, when I had school, I could hide it, but when I was at home, I can't really hide it. I can't say I'm going to work because that's not really what's happening. What's it called? But yeah, it got to the point where my parents are like, hey, we got to take action. Yeah. And I remember one day, which is crazy because at this time, my parents would never invite us to places anymore, you know, because they knew we were just going to say no. So this day, it comes and they're like, hey, we're going out to a party. You guys want to come? And me and my brother, we were both doing spice. We're both smoking. And we're like, no, we're good. We're just going to hang back. We're tired and this and that, you know, trying to make up an excuse. So they go to this party, which I found it kind of odd because my parents are like, oh, well, are you guys just going to be at home or okay, just be safe? My parents never asked that no more. You know, they had kind of, I feel like, giving up. So red flags were hopping in my head. I was like, that's kind of strange. Like, why are they asking, you know, if we're going to be home? Yeah, we're going to be home. But yeah, they get home like around 9 or 10 at night, you know, and I'm in the kitchen and I'm like, oh, like I hear someone pull up and I'm like, oh, it's my dad, you know, and I should have found it strange when my dad, they're like getting off and they're like kind of like whispering to each other. And it's not just my dad and my mom. There's like 2 other cars pulling up with them. And I'm like, oh, maybe in my head, I was like, maybe they brought some people back, you know, after drinking, you know, they're going to come and continue to drink at home, which is what they would do. But the fact that they were all whispering, I was like, man, something's up. So I told my brother, I was like, hey, Pops is home, you know, and this and that. So I'm still in the kitchen. I go back in the room. They come into the house. I go back out to the kitchen and get something else. And I see my pops and they had like all these zip ties and rope. And I was like, what the heck? And they're like, and they were like kind of like shocked, like, oh, he caught us, you know? And they started running. And I was like trying to tell my brother, like, oh, Ronnie, it's happening. Like they're trying to get us, like, run. My brother's all passed out in the room and he's like, what? I'm like, dude, like they're like, by the time they're already trying to grab me and I'm like swinging on people, man, I felt so bad because I hit one of my dad's family friends, you know. I guess she's like my tia, but there was girls there too, so she was like trying to grab me. She's this big girl and I'm like, oh, I hit her. Next thing you know, she's on the ground. I don't know what the heck is happening. I'm getting tackled. My brother's finally out of the room, but I hear them all yelling like, ah, because they're like obviously on top of them. And man, can you imagine waking up from a high and that happening? And so my brother was freaking out. We both were, but man, it was just crazy. They finally zip tie us and I'm still like, going crazy. My parents turned up the TV at like the volume that the highest it can go. We're yelling out at the top of our lungs, help, we're being, you know, assaulted, kidnapped. Man, it was crazy. And since we were going crazy, my dad is like, we need to get something to calm them down. So the family friend's like, oh, I know somewhere where we can get like medicine that will put him to sleep. As soon as I heard that, exactly. As soon as I heard that, I was like, you know what, man, this is a lot of fuss. I'm not going to keep yelling. Because imagine, like, I got scared. I was like, nah, they pumped me with something, I'll die. You know, I felt like, yeah, exactly. That's what I think they were going to get, like a horse tranquilizer or something. So I was like, you know what, I'm good. I'm not going to argue. Cops come to the house and man, I was like, perfect, cops are here. I was like, they're gonna help us, you know, they're gonna see my parents are gonna get in trouble. That's what you get. That's what my mind, you know, once the cops got there, seeing us all zip tied, man, they told them, oh my gosh, this cop knew me and he was like, oh, I know you. You're from school. You got expelled. We expelled you, you know, from this school. And I'm like, oh, there's already a bad. So my parents are like, hey, we're just trying to get them help. But they get so violent, so we have to tie them down. Like, we're honestly just trying to take them to get help. And he was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm gonna escort you all the way to the end of the city limits. I'm going to have someone else waiting to escort you all the way to San Diego. Man, was I so upset. I was so sad. My parents, I was telling them, like, yeah, I'm never going to talk to you. I'm never going to do anything. Like,
and at this point, you had no idea, like, where they were going to take you.
Yeah, I had no idea where they were going to take me. So I was terrified, you know. I was terrified. But we ended up in Mexico. We ended up in Mexico in a rehab center out there. Which was actually really fun. Now that I submitted to the program, it was like really, really fun. And it made me realize, like, hey, you know, I was messing up really bad. You know, and that's why I call it my Jesus story, because without my parents having to do that, I wouldn't have had realized that my life was so messed up, because I was so addicted to the drug. That's all I wanted. I didn't care for love. I didn't care for trust. I didn't care for nothing, you know? And it stemmed down from my childhood, because I was like, man, if the drug could make me feel like this, I don't want to feel the pain that I'm feeling at the moment, you know?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people do drugs because of that, you know, and they stumble upon it. They just want to feel that numbness. But coming into this program, I'm very grateful. I met great friends to the day. I still talk to some of them, and like, it's crazy. Like, they have similar stories like me, because, oh my gosh, Mexico's different. It's not like out here, you know?
I just want to make an announcement. If you're watching this, we are not condoning kidnapping anyone or your children and taking them to Mexico. No,
yeah, nah, that was, I would say that's
or tranquilizing.
Yeah, that's definitely too far from what my parents did. I mean, it happened to me, but man,
they chased you down.
They chased me down, you know. But yeah, that I mean, I could see how relationships would be broken if I wouldn't have had changed, you know.
So at what point of your life, or where were you, or was it there in that situation that you gave your life to Christ?
You know, that is I grew up Catholic, so I mean, this program was a Christian program, so I got to find a relationship with Jesus, and they introduced me into, like, hey, this isn't a religion that we're basically following, that if you don't pray this prayer or if you don't say this, then you're not gonna be in communication with Jesus. They're like, in all reality, Jesus wants to help your heart. And then I was new to it, so I was like, yeah, right, whatever, you know. But little by little, the more teachings, I was like, man, the more I read, I actually submitted to reading the Bible, still having that like fight in me, but still I was opening more and more. I was starting to see that God was speaking to me, that he did love me, and I started to believe still, you know, still I had trust issues because of growing up. So I was like, I don't know. I felt like, hey, God, why would you let me go through this? You know, why would you let people do things when I was young to have me go tell my dad, and like, he not trusting me, and farther, and instead of growing closer to my family, I was like, why would you allow this to happen? You know? Of course, God doesn't allow those things to happen, you know, but we know that there is darkness in this world. Amen. And unfortunately, we live in a fallen world. But Jesus Christ came through, and this is all, it gets better. It gets better. It gets worse, then better. But yeah, we're doing good in this program. I did get introduced to Jesus. I couldn't say, I guess I did give my life to Christ there, because I finally accepted him, and I asked him, and I feel like I was changing, but of course I just had so many years of addiction. As soon as I got out of there, I think it was a month in that I fell back into addiction. I had relapsed, you know. So I had 9 months clean and sober, not even a year yet. I would say 10 after graduating that program, and I started smoking weed again, you know. Oh, I'm not going to do spice no more, but weed, you know, I was good. And I started compromising, you know. Man, little by little, started hanging out with friends again. And instead of spice, because my parents now know the smell of spice, I graduated to crystal meth. And that's where my life got really crazy. You know?
Stay away from crystal.
Stay away from that crystal, man. She don't love you. She don't love you. She don't care for you. Yeah, and that's crazy, because I actually got married with a girl named Crystal. It's funny. I was doing crystal while married to a girl named Crystal. That's crazy. Man. But Man, I remember actually it got to the point where I was like, I love Crystal, and she was like, oh, you do? And I was like, yeah, but I was talking about the drug and not her. Isn't that crazy? Man, putting up this big front, putting up
things
so much.
we love that don't love us back.
Exactly.
So
Man.
I mean, it went further. Now it goes into crystal meth, and I'm sure your life started spiraling even more out of control.
Man,
at that point,
it got so bad out of control. But you see, I want to say I was clever, but I feel like that was God speaking to me. Is that I told my parents, like, hey, if I ever get this bad, or if I ever fall into addiction again, please don't kidnap me. I told them. I was like, just let me know, like, hey, it's getting to that point. I wish it never gets to that point, but I told him, I was like, if it ever happens, like, it's psychologically traumatic, you know. It was such a heavy event that I told him, I was like, man, don't ever do that, like, again, you know. Just let me know I'm messing up. And I told him, if I do and I realize that and you tell me, and it, like, I'm gonna be more awake, like, I myself will put myself through a program out here in the United States, you know, the land that I know. Oh my goodness. And so
how bad off did it get when you were on crystal meth and probably things started going really bad? And what was a moment that happened that was like was changing for you, life changing when you were on that?
Yeah, crystal meth, she destroyed my life. Well, I allowed it to destroy my life because if, like I was saying, my parents, they could smell spice, they smelled weed. You can't smell crystal meth.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain smell to it, kind of like a chemical smell, but other than that, it's very discreet. You can hide it easily. So I became this ninja, you know, like I can do drugs anywhere I wanted to and no one would find out. You know, so since my parents were alert, I hid even more, you know, and in doing so, you know, oh man, I became so secretive, but it started to grab a hold of me so bad that I was feeling so lonely, so isolated. I was like, what do I need in my life, you know? And I was like, I know, I need to get married. I need a girl. And that's when I was talking to Crystal, and we got together, and like, I was like, cool, you think I'm feeling happy, you know? We started having sexual relationships, and it was so bad. I didn't love her. I was in lust, you know? I felt I felt kind of like a passion towards it. And, It was so bad because I was living a double life, and I got tired of that double life so quick, you know, so I stopped hanging out with my girlfriend at the time, and I would do more drugs. And little by little, it just went downhill so fast. I got married, and this is how I knew I shouldn't have got married. This is how I knew I shouldn't have been doing drugs, because on the day of my wedding, I was crying to God, and I was doing this drug on the day of my wedding when I'm supposed to say I do. And God's telling me, like, hey, this isn't the girl for you. Audibly, I could hear God tell me, hey, this girl is not the girl I have for you, you know? And like, don't get married. And I was like, but God, I want to get married. And he's like, don't get married. Like, I don't want you to go through this. But I'm hard-headed, man. I was like, no, God, I'm going to get married. I love this girl. I'm going to get married. And God's like, well, he's like, I didn't want you to go through this. And I stopped hearing God. I stopped hearing the voice of God. You know, this relationship that I was building with him, I feel like he had to separate from me or at least step away from me, because I was so involved in sin. I was having sex out of marriage. It was just so bad. Like, man, it was just so bad. And I got married, and I felt very lonely during the marriage. The marriage lasted 4 months, and then it all went downhill. You know, of course, I couldn't hide my addiction no more when I was with her. I could say that's definitely when I hit rock bottom. You know, I started having all these anger outbursts. I felt like she was cheating on me, and I felt like things were happening, and I started seeing things, you know, that were actually happening. And so one time she got home, and I was like, well, where you been, this and that, and like I could see her acting all strange. I got so mad, I started breaking things in the house, you know. I started just punching like all my furniture, my windows, and it was traumatic for her, you know? So she left, and ever since then, I didn't see her back. And it was just awful, man. It was just awful. She, of course, started, you know, fast forward later, like a few months, she got in a relationship while we're still married. And I'm over there in Texas, in Missouri, on my own, no family, nothing, you know, that was there. So I was just isolated, me and the drug crystal meth. I started losing my mind. I started losing the house. I started losing my truck. I had already pawned all my tools. And I was just sitting in the corner one moment, and every little noise that would happen, I would just be like, hey babe, is that you? Like, I'm sorry, like, please come out, you know. And I was like, man, I gotta get out of this. I have to get out of this. And I called my pops and I told him, hey, the situation, remember, it's really hard for me to talk to my pops. So I finally grew the courage. That's how low I was. I grew that courage to be like, hey dad, you know what, this is what's happening. And he's like, man, I thought he was gonna like get mad at me or like yell at me, because that's what I was experiencing before. But I felt love. And he's like, son, why did you wait so long to tell us? We're here for you. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna send you money.
Felt like the prodigal son in that moment.
Yeah, it did. I felt God's love too, because like this love that I've been seeking for so long, that I had been only found in the drug, I finally found my dad giving it to me, and it felt so good, you know. It felt genuine. He was like, man, I'm here for you, and man, did I want to hear those words. So he's like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna send you money, $200. Find yourself a way to get down to California. So I looked for plane $450 a ticket. I was like, yeah, that's not happening. And I was like, well, bus there is for bus, but it's only like $200, you know. It's only like $200, and like it was a 3-day bus ride, and it would have worked, but I would have died if I would have took that 3-day bus ride, because that's the whole $200. It was like $198 plus tax. And 3 days, I hadn't eaten for like 2-3 weeks, I think. And so I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. So I was giving up. I was like, you know what I need to do? I need to go buy more drugs and figure out what I'm going to do with $150. How am I going to get home with $150? So I hit up my friend, and I was like, hey, I'm trying to find a place or some way to get home, you know, to California, because I'm messing up. And I'm still super grateful to the day. His name is Dakota. His mom and her family, you know, they're like, man, to this day, I love them. I call her my second mom, you know, because she really helped us out. And I know I was bad in her home, but she still took me in, you know. And her son, he's like super cool dude. But I seen God use them for me, you know. And I went over to their house, and they're like, hey, we're going to help you look for, you know, a way to get home. And they did. They were looking up, and the dad comes in, and he's like, why don't you ride the train? And I'm like, the train? You mean like the cargo things, like run out of cargo, you know? And he's like, no, it's kind of like a bus, but on a train. It's called Amtrak, yeah. And he's like, you get your like seat, and he's like, it's pretty cheap. He's like, they got like restaurant even on the train. And I was like, there's no way people still ride trains, you know. I was like, fine, let's look them up. And we looked them up, and sure thing, they had the last departure for the week that night at 1 in the morning. I tell you, when it was already like 11. So I was like, let's do it. I'm buying it. The ticket was like 147, something like that, or 139. So I definitely had money to have on the train. So I was like, this is it. They take me to my house. I just get a backpack, my guitar, take me to the train. And just like I expected, I get to the train station. There's only one other person. It's this girl. And then the conductor that's like, all aboard. I said bye to Dakota and his family. You know, I cried, man. And yeah, so I had gotten on that train, and I got in my little area, and it was good. I finally rested for what seemed like a long time. Woke up, and it was like, man, it was beautiful. There was people all around. Families, children, all types of people. And I was like, man, this is really cool. I can't believe people still ride trains. So I enjoyed that train ride. You know, I got food in my belly. It was a 3-day train ride. It was great. And when I got to California in San Bernardino, my parents picked me up. And they gave me that hug that I wanted. And oh man, I felt God's presence there, you know. I felt God's presence there after so long. I felt worthy, man. You know, and most definitely I felt loved. And I wanted to have been looking for that, you know. So I get there, and of course, you know, I rest, and I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to go visit a friend. And that friend was still doing drugs, because I was like, I'm not going to do meth no more. I'm just going to smoke a little weed. Of course, the same compromise that got me to where I'm at every time is like, I'm just going to smoke a little weed. Well, that friend also graduated to meth, so he was doing more drugs. And I was like, man, and he told me that, hey, he had seen this person with this girl, and it got me so mad to the point that I got so furious. I hated women. I hated men. I hated what everyone could do. So not only did I have a trust problem at that time, it grew tenfold, you know, almost 100-fold of how much hatred and how much anger I got. It got so bad that I wouldn't even use my front door anymore, Cody. I would start using my window because I didn't want to see my mom. I didn't want to see my little sister. You know, I grew up with a good relationship with them, but now I didn't want to see them at all. I was so mad at people. So I don't only do drugs. It got so bad that I was like, oh man, you know what? I'm going to commit murder, you know? So I went to this mountain. I told God, like, God, I need you to help me, or if not, this is going to happen, you know? And, I was like, God, please speak to me. I'm having, like, I need you. Like, let me know if this is the path that I need to take, or if I need to change paths, like, please. So I was like, I finished that. I go down to go get high, to go get more drugs to meet my dealer. And he normally shows up real quick. You know, I would meet him at a restaurant, and he would show up quick. He never, like, had any problem. So I hit him up. I'm like, hey, I'm here. He's like, cool, I'll be there in 10 minutes. And he would be there in 10 minutes. This time he wasn't, you know? And 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by. I hit him up. I'm like, hey, bro, I'm still here. He's like, oh, yeah, no worries, man. I'm on my way. I'm already on my way. I was like, all right, cool. 15, 30, you know, time is passing. And he's not showing up. And I'm like, hey, bro, just let me know. Like, come on. Like, I'm still trying to get these drugs. I'm trying to do all this, you know? And he doesn't show up, but some undercover cops do show up. And I'm like, I'm busted. He ratted me out. Like, oh, man, he knows I'm a commit murder and this and that. Man, those cops weren't there to freak me. They were just there to eat, you know? But in my paranoid state, that's what I thought. It was a setup, so I'm hitting him up like, man, like, it's a setup. Don't show up. So I go into the restaurant, and I go in. I only buy a drink because I'm like, of course, I still need to save my money for the drugs. I buy a drink. I'm sitting down, and at any moment, I'm just like, these cops are going to be like, we got you. Like, no, man. They're just enjoying their food. But something beautiful about this restaurant is where I met Teen Challenge. Is this program that God used to help change my life. And I'm so grateful, guys. If you don't know about Teen Challenge, I recommend that you guys look it up. They're about free in every state. We're almost international now. We are international, so like worldwide, we have Teen Challenges. Look them up. They are a beautiful program, and God is working so powerfully in them. Well, I met Teen Challenge. They go fundraising door to door, and they tell people about this program, and they try to collect funds. And after the day, they go out to eat. So they went to this restaurant. They see little addicted Jimmy, you know, right there all freaking out. Of course, it's going to call their attention, but something called my attention too, and that was the Holy Ghost, or the Holy Spirit that was shining through them. You know, I could tell that maybe they were once broken. They were all like these big dudes, you know, like all blasted, but they were talking about God and all these testimonies that they had just encountered in the day. A weary soul, someone that's lacking love and wants this fulfillment of God, I was drawn to that. And they were drawn to me. They're like, hey, we see you. One of them comes up to me, and to this day, I wish I knew him. But one of them comes up to me, and he's like, hey, I I know what you've been through. I've been through it the same, but I want you to know that there's a God that loves you, and that he told me to tell you that this isn't the path that he wants you to go.
And you just prayed like, God, give me a sign.
Not even an hour before, I was like, God, don't let me, like, if you really love me, give me a sign. And here he was, like, he showed him through the love. I could feel God. And it's basically like if God himself came up and he told me, like, this isn't the path I want for you. He showed me about Teen Challenge, and of course I looked it up. The next day I'm finding, that same day, I'm finding information about Teen Challenge. I enter the program about a week later. That Wednesday, I entered a Tuesday. That Wednesday, I gave my life completely to Christ. Completely to Christ. I surrendered. To this day, it's almost 7 years now. To this day, I haven't touched meth. I haven't touched weed. I haven't touched alcohol. Man, when I tell you that I was so stubborn that it took me to almost get myself killed, not only with drugs, but literally myself. And I needed God. It took so much, I could see God throughout the whole journey, but I was ignoring him, And then I'm like, God, why would you let me do this? And he's like, come on, man, I told you not to walk through this. Can you imagine when I finally heard his voice again? Because the time I heard his voice again, I was crying and cursing him, and I was like, God, why would you let me go through this? Why? And now that I have a daughter, this is gonna be big. Now that I have a daughter, I could put it to this relationship. It's like I see my daughter do things, and I know it could hurt her, and I'm like, don't do that. But they're like so curious, and they keep doing it, And she gets hurt and she starts crying. And I was like, man, I told you, like, don't do that. And I hold her and I'm like crying too. Like, I never wanted you to do it. That's what I kept telling you. And she's over here crying and she draws. So that's how I felt. Like, I was like telling me, like, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And I go and I either burn myself or I do all this. And I'm like, God, why would you let me go through this? And he's like, I felt his hug. I felt his love, like telling me, like, I never wanted you to go through this.
So everything that you've been through in life up to that point, like traumas, issues with your family, with your dad, things that had happened when you were a kid, going through addiction, drinking, getting high, anger, mad at the world, and then in this moment you surrender to God. And you immediately feel, of worth. You feel loved.
Yeah.
And everything turns around. And that's why we call these interviews basically next level. Next level with God, is because the world, it promised him fulfillment through drugs and women, partying, whatever, like so many of us have done before. And we know that none of that lasted, and it made us feel more empty. And like Jimmy, his story he's sharing, it actually like drove him further and further down, and he could never kick it or beat it. And he was able to get to this next level with God. So man, that's crazy testimony.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that the men and women are getting to hear it today. But I want to talk about, so 7 years now since you said yes to Jesus and you accepted that free gift. And so what's up with your life now? What's life look like for Jimmy now?
Well, now I live in San Antonio, Texas, and I can say I am enjoying life to the fullest. I thought I was comfortable with not getting married. I was like, God, I never want to go through that. So you know what? I'm gonna dedicate my life to you. Like, if I ever get in a relationship now, like, she has to love you more than I love you. And at that moment, no one was gonna top me.
Yeah.
I would tell my pastor. He was like, I told him, I was like, man, I'm never leaving California and this and that. And he's like, right. He's like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And sure thing, I'm like, nah, I ain't leaving California. Sure thing, God, he's like, I was trying to apply in all these other places after I graduated Teen Challenge and the Ministry Institute. And nowhere in California had openings, but San Antonio did. And I could see God's hand moving because this guy that works out here, the director of Adult Teen Challenge of San Antonio, Texas, his name is Austin, and he was like, hey man, like there's a position, you know, you want it, like this and that. And I was like, yeah, for sure. And man, it was so crazy. Like, I never even did an interview. You know, when you get interviewed, I didn't even, he's like, it's yours. Like, it's yours. I was like, okay. So I was like, I'm never leaving California. Here I am on a plane coming to Texas. And I was dating this girl named Jasmine. Oh my gosh, what an angel. She loves God. Sometimes I feel like she loves God more than I do. And like I say, at that time, I did not believe it. But man, this girl has such a fire, and with her, I know, like you say, it's taking us to a next level. I was like, God, I could do it all by myself and this and that. And God's like, no, I'm gonna need someone. And I'm glad she's been there because
you're gonna need to help me.
You're gonna exactly. And I'm so grateful that she is. Well, I've always wanted a kid. And I've prayed for her and our daughter. And when I met Cody, that's something that we would pray at church. We had this prayer circle, so powerful.
Well, you forgot in here, you came from California to Texas.
Yeah.
And you started working for Adult Teen Challenge in San Antonio. And then 2 months later, the greatest thing in your life ever happened.
I met Cody.
And you met me.
Yes.
And so we were doing, it's before we started Worthy People Church. We had started and we're doing addiction ministry basically, to where we would have a Celebrate Recovery type of class, twice a week, working with people on probation and on parole just out of prison. We were in the hood and working in the streets. And so I got a phone call one day and they said, hey, Adult and Teen Challenge, and I didn't know a lot about it. I had to actually ask questions and kind of look it up, and I was like, man, this is along the same lines of what we're doing. And they said, hey, they want to know if they can come to the church and share testimonies and play music. And I thought, man, that's great, And I said, is there a certain cost associated with it? We don't really have a lot of money. What? No, they'll come out, and we set up and we sell crosses and things like that, and so it was a Sunday, and that's where I met you.
Yeah.
And you were the leader, kind of leading the guys, and they were there with their music, and you started telling me, oh yeah, I just went from California, and I said, yeah, y'all are welcome to come visit the church on Sundays. You're like, well, we're usually doing outreaches on Sundays, and so you gave me a brochure and you wrote your number, your California cell phone number, on the back of it. I think it was a blue brochure and a blue pen, so it was so hard to read. I remember
that. That is so funny.
But you guys had sold the crosses, and I was so busy kind of talking to everybody that I wanted to buy one but didn't. And so you guys packed up and you left, and I remember I gave y'all some money for lunch or something to go eat after the service, and I told Julia, I was like, man, I was going to buy a cross. And I didn't get a chance to because I was talking. And right after I said that, it wasn't a minute, the door opens back up to the church, and you handed me a cross, and all of the guys had signed it.
Yeah.
Signed the back of it. So I still have that. And man. I just had to fill the viewers in on the best moment you had when you get to San Antonio.
That is true.
You almost forgot about us.
Oh,
Jimmy.
Sorry. No. That is so funny. Well, I did. Oh man, how could I forget that day? He almost killed himself by eating saltines, man. You remember that? You ate 20 saltines without drinking water, and I was like, okay, this guy needs to drink water before he stops breathing. But it was a great illustration. He's talking about how we try to fulfill our life with all these things, and they just keep getting us drier and drier instead of getting
Jesus
us.
Jesus said, "I'll offer you water; you'll never thirst again."
Exactly. And it was so powerful. I still remember that. And that was years ago, But then later on, he calls me. He's like, "Hey, man, out of nowhere."
A year later.
Yeah, out of nowhere. And he's like, "I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Cody, Cool Ministries." I remembered you, especially because of that illustration that you showed. And you invited me out to your church, and that was so special to me. Me and my wife, we entered, and we felt like family. We've been looking for a church for a long time, and we couldn't find one. And then finally we stepped in, and we were like, wow. this is different. I could feel the Holy Spirit in here, and because of that, we stayed. We felt the love. We felt so welcome. And we kept praying for our daughter. We kept praying for a house. Man, I've seen so many miracles.
We had a prayer circle
we
would do at Worthy People Church every Sunday. Like an hour before service, everybody would meet, and it was just like 4, and then it was like 8, then it was like 12, and then like 20, like. And in that circle for that year, I mean, we prayed for so many things.
It
like
was so anointed.
We saw people get jobs, houses, praying for, diagnoses, cancer, all this stuff. And the biggest one, every Sunday is that we'd go around the circle and you guys would say, we're praying for our future children or our future child and to get pregnant. And we always stood in faith and said, it's going to happen. And we believed God for it. And then, I don't know how many months after that you guys told us, hey, we're pregnant.
Hey, we're pregnant. Yeah, it was incredible. I think you guys were one of the first people we told. We were so excited. We wanted to share that news with you because we know we had been praying for it for a long time. And we have a beautiful baby daughter. Her name is Marcella. Her middle name is my mom's name, so Eliodora. And then, of course, we are so happy with her. She's been it's been such a hard time with her. But I would never trade being single or with just me and my wife again, because she brings us so much happiness, even though it's difficult. But it is so much happy. I see you as a dad, man, and you inspire me, man. So, thank you for that. Yeah,
man. Well, I mean, just being a part of your story as far as, you guys coming into the church, us getting to pray. We saw Marcella. I think a couple of months after y'all were going, you're like, hey, about doing the wedding. And I actually so I got to do your wedding.
This guy did my wedding,
your wedding. We prayed for the baby, of course, be there when Marcella was born. And then we dedicated her.
We did dedicate her,
as a church. So we have all those little milestones. That's been cool to be, part of your journey.
What a life.
And, I got to say, just to throw in with Jimmy, is that Jimmy's always, as far as being a part of the church, like my right-hand man. So if you ever saw me on a Sunday at a prison doing service, Jimmy was back in at the church holding it down and preaching and leading worship and like so many things. And so I would always say like, hey, this is my right hand man. And so
thank you,
he would always just step up and do whatever needed to be done. And so that's really why I couldn't wait to have him as one of the first people here, just being a part of his journey, but and seeing and so much and he's still part of Worthy People today.
Yes, I am.
Going to the prisons and we're on this next chapter journey, and man, that's the next level with God.
I could see God moving for sure in that, man, it's just to see where I had no joy, no hope, and nothing. Now I go to work all happy. Is that, man, me and my boss, we get along, man. And, Cody knows about my boss. But, I actually work. Cody is my boss. But, and
man, you keep talking to me like that, you might get a raise.
Oh, come on. There we go. Yo. Yeah, guy's right. And let him know, hey, come on, bump it up. He's doing good. No, I'm just kidding. No, I enjoy my life. And this smile, I didn't used to have it. I remember when I was a kid, I used to smile a lot, but I lost this smile. And now I love smiling. I love having fun. I love laughing. I love going on walks. I love coming to church. I love being part of it, our events, and just to see God move in everyone else's life, and for me to be part of that, to just walk a little bit with them. They may be struggling. They may be wondering if they gotta be with this girl, and I'm like, man, just continue to seek God. Ever since I started seeking God, that's when my whole life changed. When I finally stopped following my own desires, I kept driving. I kept driving myself downwards. As soon as I started following God and God just used me, I want to surrender it all. Everything turned around. I got my joy back. I got my peace back. Man, I trust. Me and my parents, our relationship is restored. I love them. I was able to lead my pops to Christ, my brother to Christ. My little sister, I remember when she was going to college, she's like, hey, I started a Bible study group. It's all crazy. I feel like without me going through so much, maybe my family wouldn't be saved right now, you know?
Yeah.
And God chose to use what the enemy meant to destroy me. God chose that to be my light. That's why I stand on Matthew 5:16. Therefore, let your light shine before others. That way, anyone who may see it can glorify your Father who is in heaven. And that's all it is. Now my light just shines. And if people come to and glorify God through it, that's all that matters, man.
And that's beautiful. You know, that's how I came to Christ, is seeing, not in a church service, not in a coming to Jesus moment, but just seeing the light of other people. Like, man, they got something else, they got something that I don't have. I want to make this plug real quick before we close out, and then I'm gonna ask Jimmy to just share an encouraging word with you guys. But Jimmy is someone, you know, through his work of working with Adult and Teen Challenge, he had years experience to be able to walk with, disciple, counsel, and mentor so many people. And that's kind of a role that I would always lean on him and still do to this day. He has a calling for that. He has a gift for that. And so so many of you guys write us and you're looking for a mentor. And so we get crazy mail. We get hundreds of letters a day, but I'm about to overwhelm Jimmy right now with some mail. When I say this is that many of you have written. And so if you're looking, you relate to Jimmy's story, you're looking for a mentor, and I would encourage you to write, you know, and you address it to Jimmy. We'll get it on the envelope or just in the letter. If it says, hey, can you give this to Jimmy or something like that, reach out to him and we'll get him your information. And so that, you know, maybe he can message you or something like that. Of course, he's busy. He's working. He's a family man. You know, he won't, you know, get to all the time. But if you're serious about looking for someone as far as for a mentor or discipleship, he's definitely someone. So of course, write us and write to him, let him know. I know he would love to hear from you. But what is just something encouraging you can leave with those right now, of course, in prison, or that may be in addiction in prison, like they can't kick the spice, you know, the K2, the synthetic, you know, or the hooch or whatever it is, the meth, of course, almost everything it gets into, you know, jail and prison facilities. But what would you encouragement that you could leave with them?
Yeah, I would definitely say is when someone brings something up that you may be struggling with, don't be so quick to be defensive about it. I know we're going to want to. That's what I did. I wanted to be like, nah. Just be like, okay, well, let me think about it, you know? Like, let me think about what you just said. And just with having that little bit of humility, instead of closing those doors immediately, you can open them up for you to be like, hey, do I have a problem? Am I struggling? And with doing so, you can start being true to yourself, because a lot of times we lie to ourselves. So I want y'all to be true to yourself and be like, hey, I do have an addiction, you know, but there is a way out. So if you're struggling today, don't give up. Don't think like, hey, the world is ended, you know, because there's still a God that loves you, that he won't give up on you. It's kind of sad because a lot of times we give up on ourselves. Don't give up on yourself, because there's a God that won't give up on you, okay? Keep pushing forward. There's help. There's people always that come around that want to show you love. Go to that church outing right there in your cell. Go to that Bible study group. It's okay if people look at you weird. Either way, we're already kind of weirdos, you know? But let's keep pushing forward, all right? And basically, just cut yourself some slack. You're going to be okay. But mainly, don't be putting off people that try to help you out.
Man, So that's powerful. Well, thanks for watching today. I hope you've been blessed by Jimmy's story. Jimmy, thank you for having us. And I just want to close out with this. That's next level with God. Hey, thank you for watching this video here on YouTube. My name is Cody and I'm the pastor with Worthy People. I'm so glad that you watched this week's episode, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to let you know our mission is to remove the labels of society by seeing and accepting all people as Jesus does. We could not do what we do or do this work without the help of people like you. And so we invite you to check out our website at www.worthypeople.org. We also ask you to consider partnering with us or sowing into this ministry. It doesn't have to be something huge. Any little amount helps. We have people that they've agreed to be able to send $10 a week, $20 a month, whatever it is that you feel you could do. You help us make an impact of taking the message of Jesus to people in prison and people in our community. And so the ways that you can do that is on our website that I mentioned before, and just click the donate button and you can give securely online. You can also give through cash sharing apps, $, Worthy People on the Cash App, at Worthy People on Venmo, and on PayPal it is My Worthy People. Also, we have a text to give number that's here on the screen below that you can text to give. We ask you if you would consider being able to partner so that we can continue doing this great work. We love you and your family. If there's a way that we could pray for you, praise report, please contact us. Our contact methods are here on the screen as well. And we can't wait to see you with a new episode next week. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe and share it with your friends. And just remember that God says that you are worthy, no matter who you are or what you've done through His Son, Jesus Christ. We love you, and we'll see you next time.